Hello, my friends, and welcome to Berry Aftercare, the podcast. We are finishing up tonight with our communication series, and we're talking about, everybody's favorite, the passive aggressive communicator. It's not a good thing, friends, even though many of us might be pros at using passive aggressive communication. It's not a healthy form of adult communication. And as with all of the other unhealthy forms of communication that we have talked about in this series, it can lead to unhealthy relationships with pretty much anybody, unhealthy relationship with yourself, which is really ultimately the worst of the situation, and can also lead back to emotional eating, which of course is going to end up with regain, which we want to avoid at all costs. So let's get on with this. We're going to talk about what passive aggressive behavior is, how it can lead to unhealthy eating. You already know that because it's pretty much the same as the other unhealthy forms of communication. And what makes for a passive aggressive communicator? And then some examples of how you can go from being a passive aggressive person to being what we all seek to be, which is an assertive communicator. And again, I want to share with you that people have talked to me after listening to some of those other communication podcast episodes and said, this is so much harder than I thought it would be. And it's true. This is a learned skill, but this is a learned skill. People really, it would benefit us to learn it in school and have an updated course every single year so that by the time we are adults, we have it down. We know how to use assertive communication. And guess what? Then the kids could teach the parents who don't have the clue, and we'd have a much healthier community. I'm not kidding you. If we all could learn healthy communication skills, you know what I heard on my favorite trash radio show the other day? I heard that there are now signs at airport gates. Please keep your hands to yourself and no shouting or fighting. I'm like, seriously? Good night. People are not behaving well. And it's kind of its own pandemic or epidemic. If we could all learn healthy communication skills, it really, seriously, try it in your home, try it with your relationships. And when you get fairly good at it with people around you, try it with your families you grew up with. That is not at all easy. It's always more difficult with the people we grew up with because they know how to push our buttons better than anybody else. So let's get on with this. Let's talk about this passive aggressive communication. Well, passive aggressive is this: telling your partner you're not mad and then slamming the door while you walk out of the room. Here's another example of what passive aggressive communication is. Your boss just told you that they're not real pleased with your latest draft of the proposal that you've been working on. They want you to prepare a new draft and have that thing on the desk before you leave for the day. Ooh, you are burning on the inside, but you smile and say through very, very gritted teeth and with a red face, which kind of gives away your anger, that'll be no problem at all. But you're really thinking, there's no way I can do that. And you're a jerk because that last version was amazing. So passive aggressive is an indirect way, that's the passive part, of expressing your feelings. Passive aggressive. You don't say it, that's the passive part, but you act it out. That's the aggressive part. You don't come right out and say it. I don't say, you know what, I'm really angry. I thought that last draft was really a good job. Could you help me understand what you would like different? You don't say anything. Yes, that'll be just fine. You smile, your teeth are gritted, your face is red. So your facial expressions, your tone of voice, or your stance or your posture. The nonverbal communication can really give away very clearly how you're feeling. And you've experienced this probably in a lot of your relationships when one partner says, "Are you angry?" "I'm not mad." So the words and the facial expressions and the tone don't match at all. It's passive. The words are passive because they're not saying how you actually feel. The tone is aggressive. So you've got components of the passive communication style and the aggressive communication style mixed into one. Not at all a healthy way to communicate, but I would say we got a lot of it going on. Let me give you some other examples and some ways you might be able to identify if you, or maybe somebody you're really close with, has passive aggressive tendencies. So when people behave, when you behave in this way, this passive aggressive kind of way, you might appear to be responding passively. So if somebody doesn't know you really well or isn't, in tune with how you usually are, unless this is your usual way, they might not catch on right away. But this passive part is not being direct. It's not being honest or stating genuinely how you're feeling. But if they know you very well at all, there's going to be something that gives away that you're not being straightforward with your words. So you're either going to have an angry expression on your face, or you're going to maybe cross your arms, or you're maybe going to slam a drawer on your desk too loudly, or you're going to give some sarcastic quip and then book it out of there. So there are tells, as they say in the world of poker. How would I know that? I don't play poker, but my husband loves to watch Texas Hold'em, and so I've learned some of that lingo. But there are tells. People can tell how you're feeling because you show them, even though you're not saying it. So let's use the examples that I mentioned at the beginning, and let's talk about how we could express those in a passive or an aggressive way. So the example was you're telling your partner you're not mad, then you slam the door as you exit the room. If it was strictly a passive response, you would just say, "That's fine. I'm fine. It's fine." Not with an angry tone, not with sarcasm, because it's fine can also be a passive aggressive way. But so if I say, "It's fine," my words say it's fine, but my tone is aggressive and says it's not fine. So you got that double message. An aggressive response, not passive aggressive, but aggressive, would be, "Yeah, I'm mad. Can't you tell? Why do you think I'm mad? Of course I'm mad." So you come at them. So the passive is not saying how you feel. The aggressive is the onslaught, the anger, the loud tone. The passive aggressive is the combo. So the second example that we talked about with the boss, who just said, "You got to have the next draft," the passive aggressive was saying, "That'll be no problem at all." But your teeth are clenched. It's a frozen smile. There's nothing genuine about it. Your face is turning red. That's the aggressive part. If it was purely a passive response, you'd probably look down and just say, "I'll have it on your desk." No clue as to the fact that you're hurt, you're angry, you're disappointed, whatever you're feeling. An aggressive response would simply be "There's no way I can do that." And that's really ridiculous, something very straightforward. So the difference between passive and aggressive is quite clear. Passive aggressive, the combination, can be a little trickier to decipher. So let's talk about some of the nonverbals that you might look for or people might be able to see in you. So these are some of the tells. Eye rolling. That's a great one. It's like, "Oh, come on." So I might say, yeah, that's fine, but I might be rolling my eyes. And that eye roll is indirectly saying, please, it's saying something not, it's fine. Eye rolling, we talked about it in the past. It could be a passive kind of thing too, but I think it's in the context, it depends on what's being said. But I think a passive aggressive, I think eye rolling is more passive aggressive. And I used to be very good at eye rolling, which was a really bad thing to do in my communication. My husband called me out on it all the time. And it was so subconscious to me. Like I really did not know that I was constantly rolling my eyes. And somehow over time, for the most part, I've kind of quit doing it. At least my family doesn't call me out on it anymore. So I'm thinking that I have trained myself to be more direct and less passive aggressive with the eye rolling. But watch people and pay attention to yourself and ask people to give you this feedback because we want to know. Yes, we do. I know you're thinking, no, I don't want to know. Yes, you do want to know because if you want what you say you want, which is to live a healthy life, keep that weight at a steady weight as much as possible. Do the things that you want to do. You've got to like yourself. You've got to have healthy relationships. And you've got to have healthy communication skills because it's all going to fall to pieces if you don't. And I do mean that. Does that mean you'll be alone for the rest of your life? No. But let me tell you something. And you know probably a lot of people who fit this bill. There are a lot of people in relationships or a lot of people who have a lot of family around, but they are very, very lonely and very, very unhappy and very disconnected in those relationships. And sometimes people stay in unhealthy relationships just so they're not alone. But I will guarantee you, in those relationships that are miserable, there's a lot of passive communication. There's a lot of aggressive communication, and there's a lot of passive aggressive communication. Because if you have a healthy relationship, you have worked toward, you don't do it perfectly all the time, but both partners are willing to learn and work toward having a healthier form of communication with each other. Because you can't have really great relationships with friends, family members, partners, children, unless you can learn to modulate, there's a good word, right? Your tone of voice, be direct and kind with your words, not scream and holler and criticize all the time. So there are a lot of people in relationships, but I wonder how many of those are the healthiest they can be. None of them are probably the healthiest, but how many of them are on that upper end of the continuum of healthy? You watch those people and you listen to how they talk to one another. And I'll bet you it's a whole lot different from the relationships and the families you know who don't communicate in very kind ways. All right, so eye rolling. Mumbling. Mumbling is a passive aggressive thing. It's like, I'm making it clear that I'm displeased, but I'm not saying, when you said that, I felt really hurt or I felt really angry, but I'm going to mumble. And then, of course, if you're having an argument with a person, they're like, what did you just say? And that sort of thing. And that is not a healthy exchange. And then there's the famous word of mumblers. Whatever can go with an eye roll, a head, like, please. Whatever is a great passive aggressive tactic. Not healthy. What about the heavy sigh? Clearly indicates that I'm thinking something or feeling a certain way that I am not saying out loud. Sarcasm. Do you know that the word sarcasm, literally, the literal interpretation means to tear the flesh? So sarcasm can be very, very painful, very biting, very cruel. Now, a little bit of playful sarcasm can be fun in the right context, but if you're being sarcastic and intentionally hurtful, it's a cruel form of passive aggressive behavior. So sarcasm indicates that you're really irritated with the person, but it doesn't come out with, I'm feeling really irritated. I'm feeling really frustrated. Comments, sarcastic comments like, come on, it's not rocket science. Translated means, I think that you're not very intelligent in this arena. Or more critically, what are you, stupid? That would not be a good thing to say either. Or if you get an email, a sarcastic or passive aggressive comment is often, per my last email, which means, listen, doofus, go back and read what I already sent you because it's in there. So it can be a very sarcastic or passive aggressive kind of statement. Here's a current day modern term demonstrating some passive aggressive behavior: ghosting. You get ghosted by somebody you set up a date with, or you're texting with somebody and they ghost you. You make plans to meet somebody, they don't show up. Ghosting is letting somebody know, I'm not interested, or you're not that important, or my time, I didn't want to hang out with you, without saying, I'm just not that interested. Ghosting, passive aggressive, and kind of chicken shit if you ask me. Okay, backhanded compliments are a form of passive aggressive behavior. For example, and this literally happened to me. I was young. I had a job, and it's really embarrassing when I think back about how I presented myself at that time in my mid-20s, late 20s. I came across as a flirty girl, right? All the time. It was, I'm a cutesy, flirty, not real bright kind of chick. And I did that because I was so insecure, and, I knew I could get attention by being cutesy. Embarrassing, right? Because maybe I was cute when I was in my late 20s, but I was also smart. I didn't feel like I was smart. I didn't feel like I could, you know, participate in business in a smart way. So I participated in a cutesy way. Not proud of that. And I got a backhanded compliment from a boss one time because I stood up and gave a presentation on this work thing that was working really, really well. And they wanted me to share it with the rest of the staff. And so I got up there and I gave this great little talk. And not nervous. I love public speaking, always have. Knew my topic, didn't scare me. So I spoke for however long and I gave my topic. The boss says to me later, wow, I had no idea you had that in you. I'm like, oh, okay. Which really let me know that what I was putting out was, you don't look like you have a brain in your head. And that is not at all how I wanted to be perceived, but it's what I counted on for acceptance and approval. And that was good insight for me as I grew into more of a professional and quit giving out that same vibe. It took a while, but who knew you could do that? Or if somebody says, oh, I didn't know you could do such a complicated task, it's basically saying, I had no idea you were capable. Backhanded compliments. Responding with personal digs. Now, family members, siblings, parents, ooh, they're so good at this because they know our spots. They know our hot spots. If you're talking about something, say you're talking about, let's say in that case, I was talking about my friend who, she just presents herself as such a ding dong. She's really intelligent, but she just puts herself out there. And maybe a sibling of mine might say to me, and you should know. So that's a personal dig, like you do the same thing. Are you not aware? But it's passive aggressive. A loving, caring person who really wanted to help you might come to you later and say, I was a little surprised when I heard you say that about your friends because honestly, from my perspective, you seem to come across in much the same way. That would be a direct, assertive, kind, loving thing to say, not a dig at you. I have a son in law. I have two of them. One of them tends to be late a lot. And so if he would mention something about another person not being on time or something, and if this hasn't happened to my knowledge, but if somebody in the family would say, says the king of being late, that would be a sarcastic, passive aggressive comment, as opposed to saying, when you say that, it's frustrating because honestly, you're late quite often yourself, right? That would be assertive. It might hurt, but it's honest and it's assertive and it's not intended to hurt. It may be intended to say, listen, that's hurtful when you do it as well. All right, so personal digs are passive aggressive. Procrastination. Now, this one, when I was reading up, I always read up on some of these topics just to get a little more insight. And I had to think about it a little bit. I had heard it before, but I really had to stop and think about how procrastination is a form of passive aggressive behavior. So let's say you've asked your partner to do some task around the house, and it's really not a big thing, like hang up, put a nail in the wall or something. It doesn't require a whole bunch of measuring or whatever. And you've asked 3 or 4 times. The procrastination can be, it might be that they're really busy or whatever, but it can be a form of passive aggressive communication because it's not saying, I don't even want that picture there. And so rather than say that, you just don't do it. Rather than saying, I have no interest in doing this thing with you, you just procrastinate and put it off. So that can be a form of passive aggressive communication. So if somebody's procrastinating, you might want to think, are they sending me a message passive aggressively? And maybe I should say, is there something going on here? Is there a reason that you don't want this done? Or is there anything you want to share with me about this? Making excuses. Oh, I'd really love to help you move. Or I'd really love to be able to do that, but I'm busy for the next 17 years. Instead of saying, I really don't want to do that. It's just not something I would enjoy doing. So making excuses or saying, oh, I forgot, which isn't the truth, but it's saying, okay, here's a shirt that I would like to get. It's a very passive aggressive shirt, so I don't get it, nor do I wear it. But if you know me very well, you know I'm not a very social person. Now, I'm a very social person if we're talking like having a real chat or if we're talking about real life and meaningful things, I'm all about it. But take me somewhere like a reception where we got to make small talk or chit chat or a class reunion. Oh, I like the shirt that says, sorry I'm late. I didn't want to come. That would be a very passive aggressive thing to say, right? But that is me. No, I would not say that. But I think it, which is a different thing altogether. Because here's the truth. So many times, even in my own relationship with my husband, I'll be thinking, oh, for the love of God, what is the deal? And I will want to say that because my go-to is aggression. I have learned, and 95% of the time, I'll say, I don't understand the resistance. Could you help me to understand where you're coming from? Because for me, this is frustrating. It takes a whole lot more effort. And sometimes healthy communication just takes a few more words, but it still takes more effort. For example, you want to be a good role model for kids, right? Using manners. Give me the butter. Not the nicest form of communication. Would you please pass me the butter? Takes more words, takes more effort, but so worth it in terms of communication, respect, kindness. You matter. I'm going to take the extra words and take the extra few minutes to let you know you matter. It matters that I talk to you respectfully. So there you go. So another kind of thing is don't worry about it. If you don't really mean that, that can be a very sarcastic response. So all this unhealthy, passive aggressive kind of communication, what's it got to do with the eating thing? Well, it's not going to be that much different. This is going to be a little redundant, but it's not going to hurt you to hear this over and over and over again because it doesn't make instantaneous sense. There doesn't really seem to be a direct connection between unhealthy communication styles and weight regain. But I'm going to tell you, there is an absolute connection with any kind of self sabotaging behavior and the way we live our lives. Whether it's emotional eating, whether it's excessive drinking, whether it's spending too much money that we don't have, whether it's spending too much time scrolling through social media so you're not present and involved in your life, it can damage our relationships. And when we damage our relationships, we are at risk for engaging in those unhealthy, self sabotaging behaviors. Why? Because we don't feel good. We're angry, or we're sad, or we're lonely, or we're brooding over what's wrong with those people. None of it is good. So if we can learn to communicate in an assertive way, we can clear the air in so many situations, not have questions between us, not have icky tension that you can cut with a knife between us, not have a relationship with the people you're closest to, or you're back to back when you want to be face to face and where you want to get closer. Unhealthy communication leads us away from each other. It just does. And unhealthy communication between people leads us away from each other, leaves us feeling badly, and then we want to feel better. So oftentimes we find ways to feel better in ways that are familiar to us and not good for us. So it's redundant. So the specifics might be a little nuanced for the different kinds of behaviors. It all boils down to just what I said. If you behave in unhealthy, aggressive, passive aggressive ways, you have tension in your relationships. You have tension within yourself because you're being dishonest. And at some level, we know when we are being dishonest with ourselves. And when we're dishonest with ourselves, when we're dishonest in I'm not telling you the whole truth, in a way that's going to damage us in our relationship, then I'm not going to feel good about myself. And it triggers my shame, and it triggers my self-loathing, and it triggers my low self-esteem, and it triggers my negative self-talk, and it's a downward spiral from there. Negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative behaviors. They go together. Same is true for healthy. If I have clear air between us, even if it hurts, even if it says, you know what, I am really angry with you right now, and I would really like to spend the next hour by myself. That's still going to hurt both of you, but you're honest. You're honest about how you feel. You're honest about what you need. And then maybe you can come back together later and talk without so much hurt or anger between you. So, and a passive aggressive person who continually claims, I'm not mad, everything's fine, no problem. Even when there's eye rolling or tone or, right, there's an emotional disconnect from self and from others. It's not good. It's not good. So it leads to unexpressed honesty in terms of real emotions, a deeper um, frustration within self, not as close to the people as we want to be. And it just is destructive. It's destructive. And every time you damage any relationship, beginning with the one with yourself, you're pushing people away. That's not what we want. And you may have learned it, you may have developed it as a coping mechanism. And that's typically what happens with all of our unhealthy behaviors. So I want you to be compassionate with yourself. Most of the things that we do that look to others like, oh my God, I can't believe they just said that, or I can't believe they just, who would do that? Who would say such a thing? Somebody who's hurt and doesn't know the skill of healthy communication. Someone who's angry and is ill-equipped with the technique of how to do this. Someone who doesn't feel good about themselves and doesn't have healthy skills for trying to work through it. And that someone is me at times. It was me most of the time in my past. It's you at times, and maybe it's you a lot of the time. So if we look at people and their unhealthy behaviors, whether it's behavior with food, alcohol, shopping, sex, whatever it is, if we look at our unhealthy behaviors, find some compassion for that person, because I'll tell you, it's a sign of something going on within that person, almost without fail. And it's also a sign, oftentimes, of being ill-equipped, not having the tools to work through those things in a healthy way. Now, there are other reasons like, personality disorders and things like that are really hard to treat. However, most of us have the capacity to learn if we seek to do so, which is why I think, hopefully, you're listening to these podcasts. So, what makes somebody passive aggressive? And before we go to that, ask yourself to look in the mirror and ask yourself, do you use sarcasm? Do you use digs? Do you use jokes about something that has upset you rather than discuss it directly? Think about it. In the population of bariatric people, so many people have shared with me, I make a joke about my weight before somebody else does. This is a passive aggressive kind of behavior. It's not intended to be that. It's intended to be protection. I'm protecting myself from the feelings. Rather than approaching a person you're upset with because you want to clear the air, do you avoid them? That's a passive aggressive. Or do you tell them fine and it's really not? Do you give people the silent treatment? Talk about a passive aggressive controlling behavior. Not talking to somebody tells them volumes, and it puts you in control. And it's a really manipulative move. But you probably learned that too. So don't beat yourself up, but learn how to not do that. Or do you give people the biggest, fakest smile you have in the most pleasant tone when you'd really like to slap them? Do you procrastinate yourself because you really don't want to do something, but you don't want to say so? Or do you find yourself sulking? So your behavior is sulking and you're letting them know, but you're not saying anything about what's going on with you. Are you that person? Can you be that person? Are you that person with specific other persons? So passive aggressive communication styles, it's often driven by negative emotions, fear, anger, resentment, feeling overwhelmed, being displeased, being disappointed, but you're not willing to say how you feel. And I say not willing because you are capable. You are capable. But like we talked about with passive communication, maybe you haven't learned, or maybe it wasn't safe for you, or maybe there's a reason you have learned not to do this. But you find other ways of showing the feelings indirectly. You do have the capacity to learn, and you do have the capacity to learn to express your feelings and know that you're safe, and that assertiveness doesn't have to be confrontation or conflict. Passive aggressive behavior, though, usually comes from deep anger, really deep anger, deep pain, deep frustration that for whatever reason you're not comfortable expressing overtly, directly. So it's important to understand that when a person is passive aggressive or is making the snide comments or is using sarcasm, that's a person that usually has a lot of deep unhappiness, maybe huge amounts of sadness inside, that they are either unwilling or ill equipped for whatever reason to share. That's not an excuse as an adult, because as an adult, we have the responsibility to learn what we need to do to have healthier relationships, to have a healthier relationship with food, to not use substances when we're upset or sad or angry instead of dealing with things. We're responsible for that. And that means you, and that means me. And also, people who communicate in passive aggressive ways, they're really clueless that they're doing this. It is unintentional. They are unaware. And so that's where the four aces comes in. We've got to become aware. So if you're dealing with somebody like this, then somebody needs to make them aware. Maybe they're in therapy, and that's a good place to start. Or if you've got a lot of conflict in relationships, go to therapy and you might learn part of the reason why. Um, Also, the goal a lot of times for somebody who communicates in this way is to avoid being vulnerable with those feelings, the real emotions. Again, for whatever reason, fear of rejection, fear of being criticized, fear of somebody getting really, really angry with them. And that was always a scary thing because the next thing you know, you knocked into the wall. Who knows? Um, People who are not allowed, who were not allowed to speak how they felt. Sometimes they may be passive, sometimes they may be passive aggressive. But keep in mind that all of our behavior, all of our behavior, that's a general statement, but the majority of our behavior is shaped by reinforcements. So you've used this kind of communication style, whatever yours is because it's benefited you in some way. So you've learned to communicate in this way without the most kind of consequences. So in your family, passive communication was rewarded maybe because you didn't raise any flags. You didn't cause any drama in the family. So I just, go with the flow, man. I ain't saying how I feel. Because if you actually did, or if you saw a sibling or another parent do it and maybe all hell broke loose in the household, you weren't going to do that. Or maybe sarcasm is what everybody in your family did. And it was a way to not get close. It was a way to protect yourself, like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Or maybe you talked back to your parent one time and you got knocked from here to next Sunday. And so you learned to be passive aggressive. You're not going to say exactly how you're feeling, but you're going to demonstrate that. Also, somebody who uses unhealthy communication, they may be dealing with an absolute mental illness. They might be dealing with depression. They might be dealing with anxiety. So they definitely don't want to put themselves out there in an honest and direct way, because who knows what kind of conflict could arise from being honest in how you feel. Maybe you're in a aggressive, abusive relationship. You're not going to be honest with how you feel for fear of repercussion. So there are reasons that we learn these things and that they are reinforced, but we have to unlearn and relearn. Same with a lot of the habits that you have to unlearn as you learn to eat healthier, as you learn to refrain from having junk food around all the time, as you learn to refrain from having sweet snacks all the time. We have to unlearn some of those behaviors and learn healthier ones. The same is true with our communication skills. So, how do you move from passive aggressive to being assertive? And remember, assertive is what we're going for. It's respectful, it's direct, and it's honest. Awareness is always the first step of change. You got to become aware of those feelings and those emotions. We've talked about that, something a lot of people are not comfortable with or have no experience with. Therapy is a great place to go with that. So, how could you possibly share? I'm feeling disappointed if you can't recognize it. I'm feeling frustrated if you can't recognize it or name that. So, you've got to become aware, and then you've got to start to look around you and say, oh, that's aggressive. Oh, that seems really passive. Gee, that seems like passive aggressive. Wow, that person is a beautiful communicator. That is so assertive. So start looking at those things and then become aware. Do you say things like, whatever, fine? Are you an eye roller? Learn about your own behaviors and ask those who you trust, who aren't going to do things to hurt you, to give you honest feedback about yourself. And then practice, 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 practice. This is going to take the rest of your life to practice. You've got to be willing to put forth the time, use the extra words, calm yourself, make gesture, say it in a kind way. You can think it however you want, but if you want healthy relationships, you'll put forth the time and the effort to learn to express it in a kind, compassionate way. Speaking of compassion, be compassionate with yourself. This doesn't work all the time, and it doesn't work most of the time when you first start. So give yourself permission to go back and say, let me try that again. Here's how I wish I had said that. People are very forgiving and they love it when you're putting effort into being better with them. So go ahead, blow it, but go back and say, let me try it again. They'll love it. And then if you continue to do it and you're consistent, they'll do it too. And then relationships get better and better, even if one person just starts it. So the examples from the beginning, let's go through those again, or some other ones, and go from passive aggressive and make it assertive. So you tell your partner, these are the ones we started the episode with, telling your partner you're not mad, but slamming the door, passive aggressive. Take a breath. They're saying, are you mad? Take a breath, calm yourself. Yes, I am mad. And the reason I'm mad is because this is what I would appreciate in this situation. That's assertive. That's assertive. So let's say you go with the passive aggressive and you're like, I'm fine, and just slam the door. Go cool off, do what you got to do to get yourself together, and then come back and go, I want to apologize for that inappropriate behavior. Here's what I would have liked to have said. That's how it works. That's how we improve. That's what draws us together. That's what prevents us from doing unhealthy things to ourselves, like eat unhealthy food or those things. Second example, your boss tells you they're not pleased with the new iteration of the proposal, wants another one. Again, maybe just say, I need a minute, or go out, or if you can collect yourself in the moment, more power to you. I don't know that I could, but I could say, I need just a few minutes, and go out, call my husband, cry, slam my door in my car, and sit and whatever I need to do, but then come back and say, listen, I'm confused in this situation because I really put a lot of effort into that last proposal. because when we spoke last, I really thought these were the changes you had asked me to make. So I would really appreciate you going over some specifics with me because at this point, I'm not sure how to make it what you want. Honest, direct, assertive. We can all learn that. Is it going to take like ridiculous amounts of courage to get there? You darn right. But who do you want to be in your life? What kind of relationships do you want to have? What kind of relationship with food do you want to have? Do you want to keep emotionally eating? Do you want to abuse yourself with food? Do you want to punish yourself with food? Which are things we do when we're not happy with ourselves or sometimes with others. So, take home messages, my friends. We are all going for assertive communication. We have reviewed passive communication. We have reviewed aggressive communication. We have reviewed passive aggressive communication. We want to work toward assertive communication. You're not going to get this on your own. You have to practice it with other people or get a coach or get a therapist. But let's work on this together. I can't even tell you the difference it will make in your relationships. Please trust me and try it out a few times. I'm guaranteeing you will get better results. And then let me know about them. Let me know. I love hearing how these things work, even if you don't do it perfectly and remember, practice makes progress. We're looking for progress. So recognize that unhealthy communication is going to damage your relationships with yourself, with others, and may lead to weight regain. And then recognize that there are reasons for the way you communicate. Check it out in therapy with a coach, practice with your friends, and realize that sometimes we have to get feedback from other people because we don't recognize these things in ourselves. So I invite you to do that. Ask people, help me out, tell me how I come across. And then maybe to have a talk with your family and good friends about what you've learned about communication. And maybe ask everybody, let's practice just one time today a healthier form of communication. And then let's praise each other when we see each other doing it. It's worth a try. Until then, remember, friends, until then, until when? Until next time. Oh, and next time, I am going to be joined by one of my very favorite bariatric besties. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I am going to tell you we are having a very real and vulnerable chat. You're going to want to join us for that. And until then, remember, we're talking about your health, which is your responsibility. Yeah, this day and every day. Take care. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. Bye-bye.